Welcome, Midnight Dreamer. Glad you made it to the quiet side of the world. This is the lore of a goddess who walks between light and shadow, the most beautiful queen and the ruler of the dead. Her tale is not just about seasons, but about choices, power, and the quiet strength of transformation. You'll hear the full story of Persephone in a calm, flowing voice with no interruptions, no loud sounds, just one smooth journey that helps your mind slow down and drift gently. So if you find peace in her story, consider staying, because then you will have a new story every night to fall asleep to. Persephone was the goddess queen of the underworld, known not only as the wife of the god of the dead, but also as the gentle and life-giving goddess of spring's awakening. Her presence was honored in two very different worlds, one dark and quiet beneath the earth, and the other bright and full of life above it. Alongside her mother, the harvest goddess Demeter, she was worshipped in the Eleusinian mysteries, a sacred set of rites that were kept secret but promised blessings and peace to those who took part in them. These rituals gave hope to mortals, suggesting that life could continue beyond death, just as the grain continues to sprout again after lying dormant in the ground. Persephone represented the cycle of life itself, returning again and again to remind the world that after every winter, spring must come. And yet, behind her gentle beauty and graceful nature, there was also the story of her capture, her descent, and her powerful role in the underworld. She was often called Kor, meaning the maiden, because of her youth, her innocence, and her connection to fresh growth. One day, when everything was still peaceful and green, she wandered into a beautiful meadow filled with flowers. The air was soft and warm, and she laughed with the gentle nymphs who danced around her. She bent to pick the most beautiful of blossoms, surrounded by colors and scents so sweet they seemed like a dream. But then, the earth opened. In a flash, everything changed. The god of the underworld, riding his dark chariot, reached up through the ground and seized her. Before she could cry out, she was taken below, far away from the light and warmth she had always known. The flowers fell from her hand, and the field grew still. Her mother, Demeter, was filled with grief when her daughter vanished. She searched the world endlessly, calling her name again and again, but no answer came. Her heart was broken, and so she wandered far and wide, her torches lit as she moved through night and day, never resting. She was not alone, for Hecate, another goddess who walked between worlds, joined her in her search. But no matter where they went, the girl was nowhere to be found. Then in time, Demeter learned a terrible truth. Zeus, king of the gods, had known what had happened all along. He had allowed it. Her own brother had given his silent approval for their daughter to be taken. And when Demeter discovered this, her sadness turned to fury. She stopped the growth of the earth. The fields dried, crops would not rise, and hunger spread. The world became quiet and lifeless, as if it too mourned the absence of Kor. Zeus, seeing the suffering of the people and the anger of Demeter, finally agreed to bring the girl back. A message was sent to the underworld. Persephone could return, but only if she had eaten nothing while she was there. Yet she had taken a few seeds from a pomegranate, just a small handful. It was enough. That single act meant she now belonged, at least in part, to that world below. So a new rule was made. She would spend part of the year with her mother, under the sun, among the blooming meadows. And for the rest of the year, she would return to the underworld, by the side of the one who had taken her. And so, every spring, she rises. Her footsteps bring warmth back to the soil, and green begins to spread again. Trees bud, rivers thaw, and the first flowers open their faces to the sun. It is as if her presence calls the world back to life. But then, as the months pass and the air grows colder, she returns once more to the shadows. The plants die back, the fields fall quiet, her absence is felt again, and winter begins. In this way, her story became the story of the seasons, life and death, growth and stillness, above and below. She moves between them all. In other stories told by the poets, she appears only as queen of the underworld. She sits beside her husband, solemn and calm, as souls pass through her realm. She receives heroes who come from the world above. Some are there to beg, others to challenge fate. Heracles once came, and so did Orpheus, who played his lyre so sweetly that even the cold halls of the underworld softened. Persephone listened to each of them, and though she ruled a place of silence and stillness, her voice could bring about great change. She was not only a queen of the dead, but also a judge, a protector, and sometimes a guide. She was often shown as a young woman, dressed in long robes, holding sheaves of grain in her arms. In her other hand, she carried a torch, a symbol of her journey through the darkness. At times, she stood with her mother, Demeter, and with Triptolemos, the one who spread knowledge of farming across the lands. Together, they formed a sacred trio of life, growth, and learning. At other times, she sat beside Hades on his throne, calm and majestic, her face strong and unreadable. She had become more than the girl once taken from the meadow. She had become a queen who moved between two worlds with power and grace. As for her family, many names were spoken in the myths. Some said her father was Zeus, king of the gods, and her mother Demeter. Others, in older stories, claimed she was born of Zeus and the river goddess Styx. In one region, she was called Despoina, meaning the mistress, and said to be the child of Poseidon and Demeter instead. These names shifted with place and time, but the story remained. She was not without children. Some said she gave birth to Zagreus, a mysterious and powerful figure, the child of Zeus. Others said she was mother to Melinoi, a pale spirit who brought strange dreams to mortals at night. Still others claimed she gave birth to the Furies, fierce goddesses who punished those who spilled the blood of their kin. In these stories, Persephone was no longer just a maiden. She had become a figure of consequence, a source of power in both the light and the dark. Even her name was spoken in many forms. Some called her Persephone, others said Persephonia or Persephassa. Some whispered Ferefassa or Persephata or Despoina. Each version carried with it a slightly different weight, a different sound to match the voice of the one who spoke it. In Roman times, she was known as Proserpina, a name shaped by a different tongue but still tied to the same story of loss and return, of death and life. Thus, Persephone stood as a symbol of what it meant to live with change. She was the daughter who became a queen, the maiden who became a mother, the seed that fell only to rise again. Through her, the world learned to wait through the cold, knowing spring would come. And in every bloom that opened after the frost, her story was told once more. Of the shades, she held her power in silence and shadow, working alongside her husband to carry out the curses that men had called down upon the souls of the dead. Her realm was not of light or laughter, but of whispering winds and quiet groves, where the dead drifted and the living dared not go. She moved through this land with calm authority, untouched by fear, for she was its queen. The poets of old described her not only as a ruler, but as one who made the wishes of mortals come true, even after death, punishing where justice was demanded. Her presence echoed in the underworld, and her name was spoken with awe. Later writers gave her many titles to match the many roles she played. They called her the Infernal Queen, the one who ruled beneath the earth, and they gave her names like Juno Inferna, Auerna, and Stygia. These names linked her to the rivers of the underworld, to its depths and to its silence. She was said to be the mother of the Erinyes, fierce goddesses of vengeance, born through her union with the god of the underworld. These daughters punished those who broke sacred laws, and in their fury, they reflected the deep, unbending power of their mother. Her groves, sacred and still, were said to lie at the far western edge of the world, at the edge of all things, on the borders of the realm of the dead. This land was called her house, the house of the queen who ruled over souls when no living breath stirred the air. In the oldest stories, there was no mention of her being taken by force. The ancient poet described her simply as the wife of the god of the underworld, his queen, calm and commanding. There was no cry, no struggle, no abduction. But later, a new tale began to take shape, first told by another poet, who said she had not chosen this life freely. In that telling, Zeus, the king of the gods, looked down and saw that his brother, ruler of the underworld, had fallen in love with the beautiful maiden Persephone. Zeus knew that her mother would never allow the girl to go willingly to such a place, so instead of asking, he gave quiet approval for his brother to take her. And so it was. One day, as she gathered flowers with companions in a sunlit meadow, Artemis and Athena by her side, he came for her. The earth split, and out came the chariot of the underworld. He seized her and vanished below. The meadow was left quiet. The flowers dropped from her hand. The world above had lost one of its brightest lights. When her mother discovered that her daughter had vanished, she was filled with sorrow. She lit her torches and searched every corner of the world. Mountains, valleys, fields, and shores. None were left unseen by her. She asked the stars, the rivers, the winds, and all things that breathed. But for a long time, none would speak. At last, the truth came out. Her daughter had been taken to the realm below. Demeter's grief turned to anger. Her sorrow stopped the growth of the earth. Crops would not rise, and hunger spread across the lands. The gods, hearing the cries of starving mortals, urged Zeus to act. And so he asked the Lord of the underworld to let the girl return. The Lord agreed, but not before offering Persephone a single seed of a pomegranate. She took it and ate it, not knowing the weight it carried. That one bite bound her to the underworld forever. It was a rule that all who tasted food in that realm must remain a part of it. But still, a compromise was made. She would not stay below forever. Instead, she would live part of the year in the world above, with her mother, and the other part with her husband in the land of the dead. Some said it was a third of the year, others said half. But whatever the number, it was enough to split her life between light and shadow, warmth and cold, blooming and silence. And so began the cycle of seasons. When she returned, the earth bloomed again, fields turned green, and life returned. And when she left, the world went quiet, waiting for her return. The place where she was taken was told differently in many lands. The people of Sicily, who honored her deeply, believed she had been taken from a meadow near Enna, a place full of flowers and peace. There, they said, a well sprang from the earth where the chariot had plunged down, a marker of the path she took into the darkness. Others in Crete told their own story, believing their island had been the scene of her descent. Still others spoke of the Nisaean plain in Boeotia, saying it was there that she vanished into the world below, near the edge of the Western Ocean. different places, different memories, but all telling the same truth. She was taken, and the world was never the same. Later storytellers placed her abduction near Athens, or near Eleusis, or close to the quiet waters of Lerna. Each region shaped the tale to their land, giving her story roots in their soil. But always the ending was the same. She became both maiden and queen, both joy and sorrow, both life and death. The places changed, but her path remained. And so the story came to carry great meaning. Her time above meant growth and life, and her time below meant stillness and quiet. She became a symbol of the turning year, of the way life fades and returns again. Even the ancients knew her as more than just a queen of the dead. She was a reminder that nothing is ever truly lost, only changed. What falls can rise again. What fades can bloom again. What is taken can one day return. Through her, they understood the rhythm of the world. Through her, they felt the seasons move, and in her story, they saw their own hopes, fears, and the promise that spring always follows winter. Vegetation that burst forth from the earth in the season of spring, bringing life and color to the world, was believed to hold a power that did not disappear, but rather pulled back into the earth when its time passed. It was this rise and retreat, this rhythm of blooming and fading, that gave people a way to understand the goddess who ruled both life and the realm beneath. She was this very cycle made divine. What grows and then hides, what flourishes and then falls away. Her presence was tied not just to plants and seasons, but to the deeper mystery of how life begins, fades, and comes again. That is why a great thinker once called her the spirit of spring, and another called her the seed itself, the hidden core of every fruit, waiting in silence until it could rise again. In the sacred rites of Eleusis, which were old and full of secrets, the story of her return from the underworld was not just a tale. It was a symbol of something eternal. Her rising each year meant more than the change of seasons. It became a promise, a sign that death was not the end, that something always returned. Because of this, her image was carved into the sides of sarcophagi, resting places for the dead, not as a warning, but as a comfort. Her presence there whispered the truth that those who go down may yet rise. In this way, she became a guide for those who crossed into the unknown, a queen not just of shadows, but of hope. In deeper, more mystical beliefs, the ones whispered by those who followed hidden paths, she was more than just the maiden taken and the queen returned. She was seen as the force that moved through all things. The mystic spoke of her as the goddess who filled the whole of nature, shaping and dissolving, creating and ending. She was not apart from the world. She was the world. Her power was felt in the wind, the soil, the stars, the silence. She was the breath of nature itself. These thinkers linked her to many other goddesses, names from many places and times, each carrying a different side of the same truth. She was called by names like Isis and Rhea, Ge and Hestia, Pandora and Artemis, Hecate and more. All were her, and she was all of them. There were tales, too, that she had become a mother through the union with Zeus, giving birth to gods of mystery and change. Among them were Dionysus, who brought joy and madness, Iacchus, who guided the initiates of the sacred rites, Zagreus, who is both child and god of the underworld, and Sabazius, worshipped in rites not spoken aloud. These names echoed through ancient songs and secret prayers, each holding a piece of her mystery. She was the mother of renewal, not only in the earth, but in the soul. Her titles, spoken by poets and singers, revealed her many faces. Some names called out her rule over the dead, reminding people of her throne in the realm of shadows. Others hinted at her deeper meaning, the hidden pattern behind life and death. She was praised in sacred songs and honored in rites where few were allowed to speak of what they saw. Her worship was often joined with that of her mother, who shared her sorrow and her power. Together, they were honored in sacred places and in the quiet rites of mystery. One region told how Zeus had given her the city of Thebes as thanks for something she had done for him. The story did not say what the favor was, but the gift showed her importance among the gods. Another tale said that the island of Sicily had been given to her as a wedding gift, a land to call her own. In that island, her worship was deep and joyful, with 2 great festivals held in her name. One came when the seeds were sown, and the other when the crops were gathered. In this way, the people tied their harvest to her story, knowing that what was planted would rise, and what was gathered would grow again. The rites at Eleusis belonged to both her and her mother, shared between them like the light and the shadow of the year. But in Athens, one special festival belonged to her alone. It was held in the month called Anthesterion, when the flowers returned and the air grew soft. During that time, people remembered her story and felt her power in the blooming fields and the warming earth. Her temples stood in many cities, each one a place where her presence could be felt. There were temples in Corinth and Megara, in Sparta, and far to the south in Locri. In those places, people brought offerings, whispered prayers, and took part in sacred rites. They did not cry out her name in the streets, for her power was not loud. It moved quietly, deeply, beneath all things. In art she was shown in many ways. Sometimes she wore the solemn look of the queen who ruled below, stern and silent like a judge of the dead. Other times she held a scepter and a small chest, symbols of secrets too deep to name. But more often, artists showed her at the moment her story began, the moment of her taking. They carved or painted her in the act of being swept away by the god who claimed her. Her arms reached, her face turned, her robes flowed like waves around her. It was the moment the world changed, caught in stone or color. This was the story of the goddess who was both maiden and queen, both life and death. Her presence touched every part of the year, from the first leaf to fall to the last blossom to rise. She was not only a name in a tale, she was the rhythm of the earth, the silence in the seed, the whisper in the wind. And in her stillness, there was always motion. In her absence, there was always the promise of return. In her loss, there was always the hope of renewal. And so her name was spoken, not in fear, but in reverence, by all who saw the seasons pass and felt the world turn. In the underworld, where shadows stretched far beyond sight and the stillness echoed louder than sound, the story of a goddess began, not with her descent, but with her birth. A painted red figure crater from Apulia, created in the 4th century before our time, shows her presence there, already crowned in the gloom, already revered in the land of the dead. But before that shadowed realm called her queen, she was born in the brightness of the world above, a child of the sky and the harvest, a daughter shaped by fate. Zeus, ruler of the heavens, once came to the side of Demeter, the all-nourishing goddess whose power brought forth the grain and the fruit from the soil. In that union, Persephone was born, she who would one day walk between the world of light and the kingdom of the dead. A poet from long ago, writing the songs of the gods in epic form, tells how Zeus took Demeter to his bed, and from their union came the white-armed maiden. But she would not remain in her mother's care forever, for the god of the underworld desired her, and Zeus, wise and watchful, gave her away. Another old hymn, sung in praise of the goddess of the grain, begins with the tale of her daughter, the one with trim ankles and bright eyes, who was taken by the Lord below. He did not seize her against fate's will. She was gifted to him by the King of the sky, who saw what was needed and did what must be done. The maiden who laughed in the fields would become the queen who ruled in shadow. A fragment of ancient lyric, faded and fragile, speaks of how the sister of Zeus, Demeter, and her daughter were both beloved by the blessed gods. That daughter, Persephone, held a place of joy among the immortals, even though her path would soon lead her into silence. Her name was spoken by many poets and priests. Again and again, she was described as the child of Zeus and Demeter, her lineage clear and unshaken in the songs of the ages. Yet not all tales followed the same line. One old storyteller, writing the great library of myths, once called her the daughter of Zeus and another goddess, Styx, the river of oaths and death. It was a curious variation, one not often told, but it remained as a reminder that the stories of the gods were many and layered, each one adding new threads to the tapestry. In most places, she was known only as the daughter of the harvest in the sky. Among the strangest and most forgotten of tales was the one in which she did not only rule the dead, but shape the living. In that old myth, she was called by a different name, Cura, the one who cared. It was said that one day, as she crossed a river, her eyes fell upon a patch of soft clay. With gentle fingers and quiet thought, she picked it up and shaped it into the form of a man. While she was still wondering at what she had done, Zeus appeared. She asked him to breathe life into the figure, and he agreed. But then came the question of naming. She wanted to give the man her name, for she had shaped him. Zeus refused, saying the man should bear his own name as the giver of life. At that moment, the earth itself rose up. Gaia, the ground beneath all things, spoke and said that the man should bear her name, for his body was made from her own. The three of them argued, unable to agree. So they called upon Kronos, ruler of time, to settle the matter, and his decision was this: Zeus, who gave the man breath, would hold his spirit. Gaia, who gave her substance, would claim his body while he lived, and Persephone, who shaped him from care, would hold him in death. Since there was dispute about the name, he would be called Homo, a being made from humus, the earth. In this story, she was not only queen of the dead, but the first to mold what it meant to be human. Her story did not end there. From her union with the king of the gods came powerful children, gods of hidden strength and sacred madness. One was Agrius, known in secret rites as the hidden Dionysus. In the old hymns of the Orphics, he is called the thrice-born, the king of the Bacchic mysteries, crowned with vines and feared by all other gods. They say he was nurtured by Persephone in the deep places of the world, hidden from the eyes of those who would harm him. From Zeus and Persephone he was born, not in joy, but in mystery, his birth whispered in sacred songs and celebrated in midnight rites. Another child of Persephone was Melinoi, a spirit of the underworld who shared her power. Melinoi was a goddess of strange appearance, often described as having a body half light, half shadow. She brought nightmares, dreams, and confusion, walking silently through the night. She, too, was tied to Hecate, the goddess of crossroads and magic, and together they were honored in places where the line between life and death was thin. Melinoi was the echo of her mother, another presence in the land where memories walked and the living did not belong. Persephone's legacy spread through many realms. In the fields of the dead, she was a queen. In the rites of the living, she was a mystery. In the shaping of mankind, she was a hand of care. And in the children born of her union with Zeus, she left behind a trail of sacred names that carried her story far beyond the meadows where she once walked. Her journey began as a daughter, became a queen, and unfolded into something greater, an endless presence felt in life, in death, and in all the places between. And though many called her by different names, and many told her story in different ways, one truth remained. She ruled in silence, in shadow, and in mystery, and all who entered her realm belonged to her. Melinu, cloaked in a veil the color of saffron and tied to the earth, was said to have come forth from Persephone, the fearful and revered queen of the underworld, joined with Zeus, the son of Kronos. This union did not happen in the open, but near the place where the mournful river called Kokitos flowed, winding through the cold and silent land of the dead. In the tale told by the Orphics, it was not a simple meeting of gods. It was through deception that the act took place, for Zeus disguised himself to appear as the god of the underworld, using trickery to approach the queen. He cloaked himself in the likeness of the dark ruler and with cunning entered her presence. Because of this strange and dual nature of her origin, Melinu was said to have a body that was both dark and light, one part shadow, one part bright like the sky. From the god who ruled the dead, she inherited the night. From the god who ruled the heavens, she carried the light. And then there were others born of the same queen. The Erinyes, who were also called the Eumenides, the kindly ones, were spirits of vengeance and justice, feared and respected. In the songs of the Orphics, they were said to come from the union of the queen of the underworld and the dark form of Zeus as the god of the dead. Their mother, adorned with fair hair and a quiet face, was called by another name, Praxidike, the enforcer of justice. She held the hidden seeds of power within her, the power that gave rise to these daughters. In her silent womb they formed, destined to carry out justice upon those who had done harm. Their cries would echo through the underworld, and their eyes would burn with the fire of punishment. And all of this sprang from the queen, who moved in shadow, but held the balance of all things. Among the most secret of the Orphic stories was the one of the maiden's seduction, not by force, but by disguise. Zeus, the king of gods, came to her not in his true form, but as a serpent, silent and winding. In this form, he approached the queen, and their union gave birth to a child, Zagreus, a godling touched by both light and darkness. This child, born in the deep places of the world, was not raised in brightness, but in secrecy. Zeus, proud of this son, wished to place him upon the throne of the heavens. But the other gods did not accept this. The Titans, ancient and jealous, came upon the boy while he played, wearing crowns and holding toys of gold. They attacked and they tore him apart. But the tale did not end with his death. His heart, still pulsing with divine life, was taken and saved. It was passed to Semele, a mortal woman, in the form of a drink. And from that drink, she became pregnant and bore Dionysus once more. Because of this, the god of wine and ecstasy was called the twice-born, once from the queen of the dead, and once from the woman of the living. He was a child of two mothers, born of both the upper and lower worlds, carrying with him the wild joy of life and the deep silence of death. In another hymn, Zagreus was described as the thrice-born king, crowned with leaves from the vine. He was hidden, born in secret, nursed by the queen herself, and raised in silence. The gods feared him, for he was not like the others. He was the dread of divine powers, not because of violence, but because of what he represented. Rebirth, change, the power to cross boundaries that should not be crossed. In the depths of the underworld, he grew strong, and the memory of what had been done to him was never lost. A historian from long ago wrote that there were those who believed in an earlier Dionysus, one who came before the god known to many. They said that this first Dionysus, born of the queen of the underworld and the king of the sky, was called by another name, Sabazios. His rites were done at night in darkness and kept hidden from the eyes of the world. The secrecy was not because of shame, but because the truth of what had happened was too powerful, too sacred to be told in the light of day. Others told that his birth had taken place in a distant land on the island of Crete, and that his story had been passed down by the followers of Orpheus. These followers, keepers of mystery, said that after his death at the hands of the Titans, his pieces were scattered, but his essence endured. His birth, his death, and his rebirth were all part of a sacred pattern, one that repeated again and again, beyond the reach of time. Another old tale, written by a Roman poet, told of how Zeus came to the queen as a serpent, his body coiled and marked with spots. In this form, he approached her, and from that moment came not only Zagreus, but also the goddess Melinoi, born of the same union, shaped by both sky and shadow. And in yet another telling, it was said that after Zagreus was torn apart, Zeus gathered his shattered heart and passed it to Semele, not as a symbol, but as a drink. From that drink, life stirred again, and Dionysus was born. The boy who had once played with golden toys, who had once worn the horns of a child god, returned in a new form. This was why he was known as Dionysus, the god of wild things, and why he was called the one with two mothers. He was the child of the queen who ruled the silent land, and the woman who walked in the world above. In every telling, the queen remained silent. Her presence was not loud, but it was everywhere, in the birth of gods, in the cries of the Erinyes, in the shaping of justice, and in the mystery of rebirth. She stood in the shadows, calm and unmoving, the one from whom even divine power was born, and in her stillness, the secrets of life and death were held, never spoken, but always known. Semele was held back, save for a more radiant moment, a union that would shine even brighter than those before, because Zeus, who ruled from the heights of the sky, had already made a decision in the quiet place of his mind. He would bring forth a new Dionysus, a second one, a being shaped after the first, the bull-formed god who had once lived, Zagreus. The memory of that child, born in secret and torn apart by jealous hands, still lived in Zeus's thoughts, heavy and full of sorrow. That boy, born in the darkness from a hidden union, had not survived, and the loss remained with the father who had dreamed of his throne. So Zeus, in his longing, looked to the future and planned to try again. But the origin of that lost god still burned bright in the past, and it began with Persephone, the daughter of growth and queen of death. She was the wife of the dark-robed ruler of the world beneath, the one who ruled the shades and the silence. Yet before that, she had been untouched, unclaimed, a maiden whose beauty enchanted not only mortals, but immortals alike. And it was then, before the world knew her as queen, that Zeus, full of passion and desire, transformed himself. He took the shape not of a man, not of a god, but of a winding creature, gentle in movement, yet full of power. A dragon, many-coiled, soft and twisting, wrapped around her in flowing curves, deceptive in his approach. In this form, he approached her not with thunder, but with silence, and took from her what had been untouched. The maidenhood of Persephone was no longer her own. She had been hidden away, her presence unknown to many, but her beauty still reached the peaks of Olympus, where all the gods became captivated by her. They watched from above, enchanted by the light in her eyes, and each one, stirred by the same desire, tried to win her favor. They offered gifts fit for a bride, thinking perhaps they could claim her. Though none succeeded, they still came forward with dowries, treasures for a wedding that never happened. One brought a golden staff, hoping it would stand by her chamber wall. Another offered the gentle music of a harp, thinking its sound might stir her heart. A warrior came with weapons of strength, a spear, a shining shield, armor made for battle. A craftsman, slow of foot but clever of hand, brought something new, a necklace unlike any other, glowing with fresh fire, still breathing from the furnace. He had made it in hopes of softening her gaze, despite the sorrow in his own heart, for he had already lost one love to betrayal and now longed for something new. Yet none of these gifts reached her, for Zeus above them all was already taken by her. When his eyes saw her, they moved ahead of his mind, leading the way like hounds of love chasing prey. Every thought was turned to her. Every breath was fire. A quiet spark inside him, kindled by her sight, grew into a storm, fierce and endless. Even the power of love's goddess, Aphrodite, seemed weaker than what he now felt. Her beauty held him prisoner. The way she moved, the way she stood, the way her light touched everything around her, all of it drove him deeper into madness. There came a day when Persephone, alone and at ease, amused herself with a polished bronze plate. It caught her reflection, and she gazed into it as if it were another face, not her own. The plate, smooth and gleaming, showed her the image she knew so well, and yet somehow it seemed new. She smiled at it, testing how her eyes moved, how her lips curved, as if she was staring at a stranger who wore her skin. The mirror, voiceless and still, showed her what others saw, and she studied herself in wonder. It was not vanity, it was curiosity, a moment of stillness where she could understand the shape the world saw when they looked at her. Another time, in the heat of a dry day, when the sun pressed down on all things and made them silent, she stopped her weaving. The loom stood where she left it, the threads tight and half-formed. As she wiped the sweat from her brow, her bodice, tied tightly around her chest, was loosened so she could breathe. Her skin, warm and shining, longed for the coolness of water. She slipped into a running stream, letting the current carry away the heat. The water clung to her skin, quiet and refreshing. It was a moment of peace, far from the eyes of the world, but not far from the eyes of Zeus. He saw everything. From his high place, his gaze reached her, even here, and what he saw filled him with a fire that no storm could quench. He saw her beauty, bare and gleaming in the water, her shape revealed in motion and light. No cloud could hide her from him. No curtain of time could block his view. He saw, and in seeing, he burned. Though he held the heavens in his hands, though thunder and lightning answered his call, he was powerless in that moment. His greatness did not shield him. His rule over gods and men meant nothing. Love had captured him. He no longer remembered his queen, nor the beds he had once visited. He turned from the mother of wisdom, fled from the goddess of justice, forgot the one who bore his children. All others faded, all voices dimmed. Only Persephone remained in his mind, a single image burning against the darkness. And so it was in that longing that he came to her, not as himself, but in the form of a coiled serpent, winding around her as if he were part of the earth itself. The dragon form glided near, pressing close, and she, unknowing, welcomed what she thought was stillness and safety. But in that moment, she was taken. The union was silent, hidden beneath the eyes of the world. From it came a child, Zagreus, the first Dionysus, born not in the world above, but in the shadows beneath the earth, in a bed of secrets and silence. And with that child came the echo of all that followed. The gods who had offered their gifts, the gods who had longed for her hand, the gods who had once hoped to win her heart, all of them faded into the background. For Zeus, the charioteer of the sky, had claimed her not with thunder or force, but with longing and disguise. In the quiet of the stream, in the glow of the mirror, in the hush between breaths, he had taken what he desired. And from that moment forward, nothing was the same. Charm had fled from all but one. No joy, no song, no gift, no sweet speech remained for any of the immortals, except for the hope of union with her, Persephone, the maiden whose name stirred longing in the heart of gods. And it was not the High Father alone who felt that burning desire. One by one, each of those who dwelled in Olympus found themselves pierced by the same fire, a single bolt of longing hurled by Eros, whose aim was as sharp as it was wide. From the highest peaks to the gentlest clouds, all the gods turned their thoughts toward the same maiden. They dreamed not of battle or glory, not of worship or praise, but only of her. Her eyes, her voice, her grace. All desired her. All came as suitors. All yearned to win her, to share her bed, to name her bride. And Demeter, her mother, watched in dread. The brightness that once glowed upon her face, a warm rose hue like the early dawn, began to fade. It dulled, it dimmed, and the color drained away. Her heart, once steady and full of joy, now surged with fear and sorrow. She no longer walked with pride, no longer shone with the fullness of harvest. She was a mother, and her daughter was no longer safe. Around her brow, she had worn a wreath made of golden corn, a symbol of life, of growth, of plenty. But in her grief, she tore it free and let it fall. She shook her long hair loose over her shoulders, letting it tumble down like broken grain from a cracked field. Her tears came not from her eyes, but from her very being, spilling without pause, as if her sorrow had no end. For she knew now that her daughter, once untouched and untroubled, had become the center of a storm of longing. Every god wanted her, every god desired her, and Demeter, goddess though she was, could do nothing to stop the pull of love and fate. She turned away from them all. Every gift, every smile, every golden promise, they meant nothing to her. But there was one god she feared most of all, not because of power, not because of wrath, but because of pain. She feared that Hephaistos, the one with the limping step, might lay claim to her. Daughter. A bed of fire and metal, filled with smoke and hammer blows, was not where she wanted her child to sleep. The thought of it chilled her deeper than winter winds. Again and again, the same truth echoed. Every god had been struck by the same desire. All looked to Persephone with eyes full of fire, and again, Demeter wept. Her sorrow grew so heavy that it drove her to action. She could no longer stand still. She moved with purpose now, quick and light on her feet, heading toward the one place that might offer answers. She sought the house of Astraeus, the ancient one who read the stars and knew what was yet to come. There, in his silent dwelling, she fell to her knees. Her left hand rested upon his leg, a gesture of humility and pleading. Her right hand touched the long beard that flowed from his chin, seeking truth, seeking mercy. She told him everything, every suitor, every worry, every sleepless thought. She poured out her fears, letting them fall like seeds, hoping for a harvest of hope. For she believed that the stars in their endless spinning might hold a secret path, a way to see beyond the shadows. Astraeus did not turn her away. He listened, quiet and still, his eyes filled with the calm of deep time. He asked her the moment of Persephone's birth, the day, the hour, the turning of the season, when her first cry filled the air. Demeter told him, and he nodded. Slowly, he lifted his hands and began to move his fingers, bending them in patterns only he could read. He counted, not just the days, but the hidden turns of time itself, marking the wheel of years and the rhythm of fate. Then he called for Asterion, his servant. The man stepped forward and brought with him a round, gleaming object, the sphere of the heavens, a perfect image of the sky. It was carved with care, a model of the stars and the planets, a reflection of the cosmos itself. He placed it on the lid of a chest, and Astraeus began his work. He turned it gently, letting it spin on its axis, following the dance of constellations across its curved face. His gaze moved with it, slowly at first, then faster, reading the signs, chasing the secrets hidden in light. He studied the zodiac, that ancient circle of fate, and marked the movements of the fixed stars and wandering planets. He watched, he measured, he learned, and when all was known, he stopped. The sphere, its surface strange and shining, was returned to its box. He faced Demeter now, no longer silent. He spoke, and his words came in threefold rhythm, a triple oracle, clear and full of warning. "Mother Demeter," he said, his voice steady and deep, "when the moon hides her face and her light is swallowed in shadow, beware. That is the time to guard your daughter, for then a secret lover will come. He will not arrive as suitor or guest. He will come as a thief, a hidden bridegroom. He will not ask. He will take." "A half-monster," the oracle continued. "Clever and cunning will approach. He will not appear in the open, but in disguise, and he will take from you what you hold most dear. I see him now, faint but sure, a shape rising in the west, a shadow reaching across the sky. He does not wait for permission. He moves beneath the gaze of the stars." And there the prophecy ended. Astraeus had spoken. Demeter, though shaken, had heard what she came to hear. The future was no longer hidden. The danger was named. The moment of change had been revealed in the spinning of the stars and the silence of the moon. A secret ravisher was coming, and with him, the story of the maiden would shift forever. At that point, the star reader lifted his eyes to the heavens and saw Ares, the one who steals wives, moving alongside the soft light of the Parthian, the one whose beauty causes longing, the planet known for love. He saw them walking together, side by side, in the sky, and rising near them both was the serpent in the stars, the draken, twisting into view. These signs said much. They spoke of passion, of war, of a serpent's movement in secret paths. When he saw this, he let the voice of prophecy fall silent again, and the echo of the stars slipped back into stillness. The words had been spoken, and there was nothing more to add. But when Demeter, the one who wields the sickle, heard what the stars had told, when she understood the meaning within the signs, the hope of a harvest, yes, but also the sorrow of a coming theft, her heart was torn in two. She groaned in grief, and yet there was something in her that managed to smile, even if faintly. She understood what the stars meant. Someone was coming, uninvited and unpromised, to take her daughter by force. There would be no wedding, no song, no bridal feast, only silence and shadows and a stolen girl. She rose swiftly, climbing high into the sky along the secret paths only gods may tread. Her steps were quick but heavy with sorrow. She made her way to where her chariot stood, beside the manger of the dragons who had long waited for her return. Without a word, she took the curved yoke and placed it across the twin necks of the monsters, strong and restless. She fastened the strap tight around their thick hides, pressing the bit between their sharp jaws. The dragons reared, but she held them firm. And thus, golden-brown Demeter, in a chariot both terrible and bright, drove her beloved girl away, hiding her under a dark veil made of cloud, a mist that no eye could pierce. As they moved through the sky, the wind of the north rose up, roaring loud like thunder, but she would not be slowed. She cracked her whip and the monsters dove through the air, obeying her command. Their wings, fast and smooth, cut through the clouds like blades. They raced forward like horses loosed in a storm, galloping through the sky. She guided them along the edge of the world, circling the cape where the ocean curves near Libya, through wind and wave, searching for a place to land. And at last, she came upon the rocky cliffs of Three-Peak Sicily, where the sea never rests. There, the water from the north rushes and bends in a great curve toward the southwest, sweeping in like a sickle. She looked for a place to hide, a harbour made not for ships, but for her sorrow and her daughter. There, near the cliffs, stood a grotto, a cave crowned with stone, shaped by nature's hand into a hall fit for gods. A roof of rock spread above it like a cloak, and stalactites hung like threads of an unfinished tapestry. The nymphs who lived nearby tended this place, watching over it with care. Into this hidden space, Demeter led her daughter. The cave was dark, silent, and deep. She passed through the shadows, guiding her girl gently, and placed her in the safest part of the hollow, far from sight. Then she turned back. The dragons, who had brought them so far, were unhitched from the chariot. One she placed on the right side of the entrance, where the rock jutted forward like a guardian's shoulder. The other she placed on the left, beside a sharp stone that rose like a barrier. They would guard the door in silence, their breath low, their eyes sharp. No one would enter unseen. No one would pass without her knowing. There too she left Caligonia, her nurse, the one who had held her as a child, along with baskets filled with the things young women use, tools for weaving, for crafting, for the making of cloth. These were gifts from the goddess of wisdom, the one who knew all secrets of the loom. Everything Persephone would need was there. Demeter gave her daughter the comforts of home, even in hiding. Then, without a word, the goddess stepped away. The dragons were left in their place. The chariot was handed over to the nymphs, who would care for it in the silence of their cave. And Demeter vanished, her feet cutting the air as she rose, unseen once more. Inside the cave, Persephone passed her time as she had always done. She worked the wool with her hands, letting the iron comb pull through the fleece. She wound the wool around the distaff, spinning it carefully. The spindle danced in her fingers, spinning thread after thread. Her feet moved as she worked, stepping lightly in rhythm. She wove with care, moving from one end of the loom to the other, setting the warp, drawing the threads, pulling the bobbin through the gaps, singing softly as she worked. She sang not to herself, but to her cousin, the one who had given her these gifts of skill. Ah, sweet Persephone, how could you know? How could you, with your hands busy at the loom, your song drifting like dust in the cave, know what waited outside? How could you see, from within that dark shelter, that fate had already set its course? The one the stars had spoken of was already coming, not with music or gifts, but with silence, not with hope, but with power. And as you worked the wool and pulled the threads of your own story were being pulled tighter and tighter, drawing you towards something unseen. You wove the cloth, but another hand wove the path. And though the grotto was deep, and the dragons fierce, and your mother watchful, there are things no hand can stop, not even the hand of a goddess. For when the stars move, and the fates spin, and the signs all point to what must be, even those who see the future cannot hold it back. You wove your wool and sang your song, and the cave held you close, but the world outside was already changing. And soon, the black veil would not be enough. Escape was not possible. There was no fleeing the moment, no hiding from fate. You could not escape your mating. No, not even you, Persephone, could undo what had been set in motion. A dragon was your mate, not a beast of the wild, but the ruler of the sky in disguise. Zeus, who wore many faces, had taken the form of a serpent to find you, to approach you unseen, and to reach the corner of your chamber wrapped in coils of longing. Through the dark he moved, rolling in on himself, full of desire. His form twisted like flowing silk, but his will was unbending. He came not with words, but with movement, shaking his hairy jaws as he slithered closer. There were guards, creatures of his same shape, meant to keep intruders out, but even they were no match for his cunning. He lulled them into sleep as he passed, as if they too were swept into the spell of his desire. And then he came to her. The serpent touched her gently, his lips soft and wooing. There was no sudden motion, only a slow and tender wrapping of his form around hers. It was not force, but a winding embrace, and the goddess, though once untouched, became the bearer of life. From that strange and hidden union, her womb began to swell, filled with living fruit not of the earth, but of the sky and shadow. And when the time came, she gave birth to a child not like any other. Zagreus was his name, the horned infant, divine from the start. Even as a newborn, he was filled with the fire of heaven. He rose by himself, no arms lifting him, no hands guiding him, and climbed upon the throne of Zeus. His small hand reached out and took hold of thunderbolts as though they were toys, and with his other he brandished lightning. The child who had just opened his eyes to the world held in his tender fingers the tools of storms. There had never been one like him. Born of the queen of the dead and the king of the sky, he held power that was older than time, and fate that was heavier than the world. But even gods are not free from sorrow. The child who carried the might of the sky was not protected by it. Later, long after his birth, the goddess who ruled marriage and jealousy looked down and stirred anger within Persephone. She whispered words of bitterness, reminding her of things that could not be undone. Zeus, she said, rescued Semele's son. He saved Dionysus from the fire, plucked him from the thunderbolt before it could burn him to ash. But Zagreus, the heavenly Dionysus, he did not defend. He let that child be cut into pieces by knives. Her voice sharpened. He gave the starry sky as a gift to Semele, but to you, he gave Tartarus. One walks in light, the other in gloom. What kind of justice is that? The words struck deep. She reminded Persephone of the day he came to her in the shape of a serpent, stealing her maidenhood, leaving her with a child, and then doing nothing when that child was torn apart. What good, she said, was that act if he would not even protect the child that came of it? And the sorrow deepened. The loss of Zagreus, the one who held thunderbolts in his hands, the one born of a hidden love, would never be forgotten. Even poets, long after the old stories were sung, remembered the tale. In one of their texts, written to preserve the words of myth. It was said that Zagreus was none other than Dionysus, called so by the poets. For Zeus had lain with Persephone, and from their union came Dionysus of the Underworld, not the laughing god of wine alone, but the one who knew death, who had once been torn, who had once seen the depths of the world. And Persephone's stories did not end there. Among the other tales of her, there was one of a love both sweet and bitter. The tale of Adonis, the beautiful boy whose life was split between two goddesses. The story, old and filled with longing, began when the goddess of love hid the infant in a chest, keeping him from the eyes of the gods. She took the chest to Persephone and asked her to keep it safe. But once Persephone opened the chest and saw the child within, she could not return him. She looked at Adonis and saw beauty too perfect to give back. When the matter was brought before Zeus, a choice had to be made. He could not favor one goddess over the other, so he divided the year into 3 parts. Adonis would spend 1 part of the year alone, 1 part with Persephone, and 1 part with Aphrodite. But when the choice was offered to the boy himself, he gave his own time to Aphrodite, the one who had first claimed him. And so the balance was broken, but the memory of Persephone's love for him never faded. Even in songs, this story was remembered. One hymn sang of Adonis as the sweet plant of the goddess of love, a flower grown from longing. It said he came from a secret bed, a divine union, descended from the fair-haired queen of the underworld. And though he would sink into Tartarus, fall into the pit of the dead, he would shine again through the heavens, rising once more in the round of seasons. Others said the story was written in the stars, in the constellations where myths take shape. Adonis lived not just in memory, but in light. His time with Persephone marked the cycle of darkness and return, of descent and rising. Each year, the story repeated. He fell, and he returned. She waited, and she let go. And the cycle of love, loss, and rebirth played on. So Persephone, once a maiden veiled in shadow, became more than queen. She was the mother of thunder. She was the keeper of beauty. She was the bride of silence, and the voice behind the veil. The stories told of her did not always end in joy, but they never ended in silence. They moved, they breathed, they returned, like spring after winter, like flowers after frost, like songs remembered after sleep. And though she held her place in the land of the dead, her stories were never still. That day, Venus and Persephone both came before the throne of Zeus, each with a single desire. They did not come with war, but with hearts full of longing, each holding tightly to their claim over one youth, Adonis. The matter was simple to them, but complex to judge. Each one had shared time with him. Each one had felt love in his presence. So they turned to the one who ruled over gods and fate, asking him to choose which of them should keep the beautiful boy. But Zeus, wise and watchful, did not speak the answer himself. Instead, he appointed another to decide. Calliope, the voice of reason and poetry, was chosen as judge. She listened to both sides, measured the weight of their claims, and gave her verdict. Adonis would belong to both. The year would be divided, 1/2 to Persephone, 1/2 to Venus. The two would share what neither would surrender. It was a solution, not of joy, but of balance, and so it was accepted. But not all tales of Persephone speak of mercy. In another place, in another time, the story turned darker. There was once a nymph named Minthe, who lived near the river of sorrow, Kokitos, deep in the realm of the dead. She was not a queen or a goddess, but she became close to the lord of the underworld. She lay beside him in secret, withdrawing his favor. But when Persephone came, when she was brought to the underworld and became queen, everything changed. The nymph's whispers turned to cries of jealousy. She spoke too loudly, saying she was more beautiful, more noble in form. She boasted that the king would return to her, that the other, his new bride, would be cast out. Her words, born of envy, spread through the dark halls. They reached the ears of the mother, Demeter, who came down in anger. It was not a battle. There was no fire or thunder. There was only one moment. Demeter, heavy with rage, crushed the nymph beneath her feet. No blade, no curse, just the weight of a goddess's wrath. And where mint had stood, now only a plant remained. Its leaves were green and sharp, its scent sweet and strong. They called it mint, a name that carried the memory of the nymph who dared to compare herself to a queen. Some say it was Persephone herself who did the deed, that when she saw the rival who had once shared her husband's bed, she trampled her into the earth, and from that earth the plant was born, soft and fragrant, a memory rooted in the soil. Yet for all her fury, Persephone was not without compassion. Even in the realm of the dead, where silence ruled and shadows whispered, she could be moved. Once there was a man named Sisyphus, clever above all others. Death came for him as it comes for everyone, but he was not ready. With sharp words and quick thoughts, he tricked death and delayed the end. But when finally he was taken, wrapped in the dark mist and carried to the underworld, even then he did not give up. Before the black gates, he pleaded. No one had ever returned once passed through, but Sisyphus, by wit and will, found a way. He spoke to Persephone, whose presence dimmed the minds of mortals and filled them with forgetfulness. He bent his words to her ear, weaving sorrow and reason, and for the first time she listened. Moved by his cleverness, or perhaps by his resolve, she allowed him to return. The gates opened, not by force, but by her will. He walked again under the sun, though not forever. No other mortal had done what he had done. None had left that place by words alone, and he was not the only one. Another came, guided by love rather than cunning. Orpheus, whose songs could still the trees and tame wild beasts, made his way down into the depths. His wife had died, and he could not live without her. So he followed her into death, not with sword or shield, but with song. In the darkness, he sang. His voice filled the air that had never known such sound. The souls paused in their weeping. Even the harsh judges of the dead turned their heads. And at last, his song reached Persephone. She, who sat beside the ruler of the dead, who held court over the silent, heard his music and felt something stir. Tears which so rarely fell from her eyes welled up. The weight of his love touched something old in her. She agreed. She would allow his wife to return. She would give back what death had taken. But there was one rule. He must not look back. He must trust, walk forward, and believe that his love followed behind him. And so he walked, and she followed. But before the light touched their faces, he turned. Just once. A glance, a flicker of doubt. And in that instant, she vanished. The gift Persephone gave was taken back, not by choice, but by the law of the dead. Still, she had tried. She had been moved, and that mattered. For in a world where no one escaped, she had allowed two to leave, one by cleverness, one by love. Not even gods do that lightly. So her stories weave together like threads, some dark, some bright. She was the queen of the underworld, but she was not cold. She could feel joy and anger, sorrow and compassion. She could trample a rival and free a soul. She could share love, endure loss, and carry secrets too deep for the world above. And though she ruled where the sun did not reach, her presence was never forgotten. It lived in flowers, in music, in memories, and in silence. Fell dying when a serpent struck her heel. It was a quiet end, sudden and cruel, without warning. One moment she walked in light, and the next she fell, the poison already working through her veins. The snake had hidden in the grass, unseen, and its bite took her life just as it was beginning. And when she was gone, the world above seemed colder, emptier, lost without her. Her husband, the bard whose voice could tame wild things, wandered with grief so deep it filled every place he passed. He mourned her across the lands, across rivers and valleys, singing her name to skies that gave no answer. But mourning was not enough. When his tears had been shed and the earth gave no comfort, he turned his face toward the shadowed world. He dared what no living man had dared before. He walked to the edge of the world, to the dark entrance of Tanaria, where the gate to the underworld opened wide. He stepped into the land of the dead through that heavy gate, beneath a sky that no longer knew day. Down he went, past the fading of light, into the kingdom where the river Styx flows slow and black. Around him gathered the ombre, the shades, the restless shapes of those who had passed from life. They drifted, pale and quiet, with no memory of sun or sky. He walked among them, a man alive among the dead, carrying only his lyre and the fire of his love. His footsteps made no sound on the ground of that place, and the silence was heavy. At last he stood before the queen of that realm, pale Persephone, and the ruler beside her, the Lord who held dominion over all beneath the earth. She, the silent queen, looked upon him with eyes that saw not only the man, but the sorrow that surrounded him. And he, standing there in the dark, lifted his lyre and struck its strings. Soft notes echoed through the chamber, sad and low, music made not to dazzle, but to plead. He began to sing. His voice, quiet at first, spoke truth plainly, without ornament or disguise. "You who rule this world beneath the world," he said, "you know that all of us must one day pass through this gate. We live above for a time, but no matter how long or short, all roads lead here. No one escapes. We all return to this place." He paused, then spoke her name. "My wife," he said. "She died too soon. A serpent's bite took her before her time. I tried to be strong. I tried to live with the loss. But love will not let go. Love, that God so strong above, has conquered me. I know not if he rules here too, but I hope he does." And then his voice deepened with hope and desperation. "I have heard the story of how you, Queen, were once taken, how love came to you unasked, and you were brought to this place. If that is true, then perhaps you understand what it means to lose love, to want nothing but its return. I ask not to steal her from you, not forever. I ask only for time. She will come here again when her years are done. But for now, let her return to the light. Let her live. And if the fates say no, if they will not bend, then I will stay. Let her walk alone if I cannot follow. But if she cannot rise, I will not return either. Let two deaths take her place." As the music of his words fell over the chamber, a change passed through the hall. The shades, who remembered little, began to feel again. Tears came to faces that had long since forgotten sorrow. Even the Eumenides, the ancient, ones of justice and vengeance, were moved. Their cheeks grew wet, and Persephone, sitting still upon her throne, listened without a word, her heart stirred by the pain she knew too well. The queen turned to her consort. A silent agreement passed between them. They could not deny him. They would give the gift. They would call her back. Eurydice, not yet long among the dead, came forward. She limped, the pain of her death still in her heel, but she came. Her face was still young, still full of the life that had been stolen. She said nothing. Her eyes found his, and the bargain was struck. He could take her, but only if he did not look back. He must walk ahead, climb the steep road out of the underworld, and trust that she followed. If he looked, even once, she would be lost again. So he took her hand, and they began the climb. The path was narrow and rising, filled with shadows. No voices spoke, no wind stirred. Only the sound of their steps moved through the gloom. He walked in front, never turning, and she followed, her steps light, her presence quiet. But the way was long, and the heart is weak. The silence pressed in, heavy with doubt. Near the end, where the light of the upper world began to touch the path, he feared she might fall behind. He worried she had stumbled, that she was no longer there. Longing built in him, longing to see her face again, to be sure she was real. And so he turned. She was there, she had followed. But the moment his eyes met hers, the pact was broken. She began to slip, her form growing pale again. He reached for her, arms outstretched, hands desperate to hold. But he touched only air, no weight, no warmth. She faded before him. Her lips moved in farewell, but no blame passed them. There was only love, only sorrow, and then she was gone. She turned, not by her will, but by the law of that place. She walked back into the darkness, into the land of spirits, and he, left behind, could do nothing. The second death of Eurydice broke something in him. It stole not just his joy, but his reason. He wandered again, but now without hope. He had walked through the land of the dead. He had won her back, but one glance took her away once more. He sang no more, not the way he once had. He begged the gods, but the door to that world would not open again. His voice, once a bridge between worlds, now fell silent, and the shades below, who had wept for him once, now waited for the day he would return, not with song, but with silence. In vain he begged to cross the stream of Styx a second time, but the ferryman stood firm. Charon, the silent one who carried souls across the black waters, would not bend the rules, not even for one who had dared the underworld for love. Orpheus, once filled with hope, now stood rejected. He could not follow her again. The gates were closed, the way was sealed, and so, cast out from the land of shadows, he sat alone at the river's edge, where the living do not belong, and the dead do not return. For 7 days he did not move, he did not eat, he did not sleep, he did not speak. He sat, unwashed, unshaven, his eyes lost in the dark waters. His only nourishment was grief, and his only companion was the sound of the river. He cursed the cruelty of Erebus, the dark realm where light had no place. No words could ease his pain. No songs could undo the second death he had caused. His music, once bright enough to soften even the queen of the dead, now fell silent. He remained there, a shadow of a man, until even sorrow could no longer hold him upright. But the queen herself, Persephone, was not without compassion. Not always wrathful, not always still. There were times when her will opened the gate. One such time came when a man named Admetos was fated to die. The gods, moved by Apollo, allowed for something rare. His life could be spared if another would take his place. His wife, Alcestis, stepped forward. She chose death for love. She gave her life so her husband might live. And when her soul reached the underworld, it was Persephone who saw her. It was Persephone who sent her back. Some say it was another who brought her up, a hero who wrestled with death itself. But others say it was the queen's own mercy, her own choice, that restored the wife to the world above. In that quiet act, she showed that even among the dead, love could still move the heart of a goddess. But not all who entered her realm with love in their hearts were welcomed. There was one who came not with songs or sorrow, but with pride. A king named Persephone, full of boldness, sought the hand of Persephone herself. He wished to take her as his bride. He did not ask, he did not plead, he planned to steal her. He came with a friend, another hero named Theseus. Together they had taken a young girl. Before and now they thought they could take a goddess. They entered the underworld thinking themselves brave, but they were met not with resistance, but with invitation. The Lord of the Dead welcomed them, or so it seemed. He offered them a place to sit, a throne of stone, high and grand. They accepted, but as soon as they sat, they knew the trap. The throne was not a gift, it was the seat of forgetfulness. Their flesh clung to the stone, their limbs grew heavy, serpents coiled around their legs. They could not rise, they could not move, they were bound, held fast by the will of the realm they had tried to rob. And there they remained. Time passed, and they were not released. No pleading reached the ears of the goddess. No words of apology softened her heart. Pirithous, who had thought to steal her, was held there forever. His body and soul became one with the rock, a warning to all who might follow. Theseus, his companion, was more fortunate. Another came, one strong enough to challenge death. When Heracles entered the underworld on his own mission, he found the two still seated in punishment. He reached out, and Theseus stretched up his hands. With strength unmatched, Heracles pulled him free. But when he tried to free Pirithous, the earth itself shook. The queen's silence held firm. The one who had sought to steal her would never leave. Even the philosophers, long after the stories were first told, spoke of this tale with caution. They warned not to believe that children of gods could commit such terrible acts. They argued that no son of Zeus, no hero of divine blood, could truly do what the poets claimed. But the tale endured. For in myth, meaning does not bow to reason. The stories, like the gods, live on their own terms. And through them, the image of Persephone remained. She who once was stolen would not be stolen again. She who once was silent now chose when to listen and when to turn away. She had the power to return the dead to life. She had the right to hold the living in chains. And all who entered her realm, whether in love, in pride, or in sorrow, found that their fate rested in her hands. For in the land where all roads end, she was the queen. The throne was hers, the silence was hers, and so were the final decisions, from the man who begged and lost, to the wife who gave her life and was returned, to the king who dared too much and was left in stone. Each one found the truth of her rule. Her favor was rare, but it could lift a soul to light. Her wrath was quiet, but it could bind a man for eternity. And in all things she remained, unmoving, unchanging, and always watching, to dissuade him and to turn him away from such a deed as being impious. But since Pirithous firmly insisted upon it, Theseus, though doubtful, was bound by the oaths of friendship to join with him in the deed. And so they made their plan. They would descend into the underworld, into the cold and silent halls of the dead, and there Pirithous would claim Persephone, queen of the realm, as his bride. It was a journey unlike any other. The living do not often walk among the dead, but with determination and the arrogance of heroes, they crossed the threshold of the world above and passed into the darkness below. They entered the regions of Hades, where souls wander without breath, where silence weighs upon every step, and the light never touches the ground. They passed through the cold mists and the lifeless shadows. They did not come with songs or offerings, but with the intent to steal what did not belong to them. They reached the throne of the queen, where Persephone sat in her stillness, and there their plan came to an end. The realm itself, as if offended by the nature of their act, moved against them. Because of their impiety, their lack of reverence, they were both seized and chained. There, upon a great rock, they were bound, and their limbs could no longer move freely. It was not a prison of walls or guards, but of the will of the underworld itself. Time passed differently there. Above, the sun rose and set, seasons changed, people lived and died. But below, in that place of silence and gloom, Theseus and Pirithous sat. No escape, no comfort, no words. They waited, and though both had come with the same purpose, their fates would not be the same. Theseus, by the favour of a god, would one day see the world again. Pirithous, because of the boldness of his crime, remained. His punishment was everlasting. He would never again walk beneath the sky. But not all stories agree. Some tell that neither of them returned, that the underworld, once entered, does not open its doors again. But in another telling, Heracles, son of thunder, descended into that same realm, strong and bright where all else was dim and lifeless, and he was welcomed like a brother by Persephone. In that place where most souls feared to speak, he stood without fear, and by her grace he was allowed to find the two bound heroes. He broke their chains and lifted them with his hands. By the favour of the queen they were permitted to return. The realm that had sealed them away opened just this once for the sake of Heracles. And yet other voices say the story was not one of gods and ghosts, but of kings and kingdoms. They say Theseus and Pirithous did not descend to Hades, but journeyed to Epirus, where a mortal king named Idoneus ruled. He called his wife Persephone, his daughter Kor, and his fearsome hound Cerberus. This dog, he claimed, would challenge any suitor who wished to take his daughter. The beast was deadly, and only the strongest could hope to win. Theseus and Pirithous came not to face the dog but to steal the daughter. And when the king discovered their plan, he acted swiftly. He had them seized. Pirithous was given to the dog, torn down in an instant. There was no trial, no warning, just the rage of the king and the bite of the beast. Theseus, though spared death, was locked away in the darkest cells. There he remained, far from home, far from light, a prisoner not of the gods, but of a king. But fate turned once more. Heracles, passing through that land, came as a guest to the king. Over a meal, the tale was told, how two men had come with deceit in their hearts, how one had died and one remained in chains. Heracles, upon hearing the story, was filled with sorrow. He did not argue for Pirithous, for the deed had sealed his fate, but he begged for the life of Theseus, asked not with anger, but with honor. The king, moved by the hero's request, agreed, and so Theseus was freed and returned to the land he had left behind. Theseus, in time, remembered the favor. He raised an altar in honor of Heracles, not just as a god but as a friend, and others told the tale differently still. They said Idoneus was not a man, but simply another name for Hades, and the events took place not in the world of men, but beneath the earth, in the halls of the dead. The names may change, the places may shift, but the heart of the story remains. A friend joined another in a reckless act. They crossed a line not meant to be crossed. One paid with eternity, the other with years lost in darkness. And only by the strength and favor of another was one life spared. Whether by god or king, by beast or fate, the tale is remembered, of the one who came for a bride that was not his, and of the one who was saved by a friend who broke every chain to bring him home. When Zeus saw that Theseus and his companion had shown such daring, so much boldness, as to carry out a plan to steal Helen, and then to descend even further into darkness to steal another, Persephone, he decided to humble their pride, not with thunder or flame, but with a trick of dreams. As they slept, he sent them a vision, one that seemed so real they could not question it. In the dream, they were told to go into the depths of the world and ask the king of the dead for the hand of his queen, and so, persuaded by what they had seen in sleep, they set off toward the dark peninsula of Tartarus, where the earth splits and the way to the land of the dead yawns open like a wound. Down they went, step by heavy step, through silence and shadow, until they reached the gates of the dead. They entered the underworld and walked through the grey realm of ash and memory. They passed the river where the dead drifted, past ghosts with hollow eyes, until they stood before the king of that place, the one who ruled the dead. They stood before him and told him why they had come, not with gifts, not with reverence, but with a request, bold and without shame. They had come to ask for Persephone, but there are lines that must not be crossed. This was one, and the gods of the underworld did not smile. They did not answer with words. Instead, they answered with punishment. The two were taken and cast down. They were stretched upon the ground. They were chained. And for a long time they were tormented by the Furies, those dark spirits who punish the wicked. The cries of the dead echoed in their ears. The cold of the underworld pierced their bones. Time lost all meaning as they suffered. And then Heracles came. He came not for them, but for the great hound who guarded the gates of that realm. He came with strength and fire in his heart. And as he walked among the dead, he saw the two heroes broken and bound. They called out to him, begged him for his protection. They knew him. They trusted that he could speak where they could not. And he did. He stood before the king and the queen and asked for their release. And they moved by. Something in him, perhaps the fire of his purpose, perhaps the echo of brotherhood, agreed. The king gave his word, and Heracles led them out unharmed. But the tale is not told only in one way. Others say that Theseus was not led by visions, but by folly, that he followed his friend not out of belief but out of loyalty, that he rushed into the shadows not for love but for madness, and that together they sought to steal a queen from her throne. Even there, in the depths of the dead, they tried to bring ruin, and the price was clear, for there, in the heart of the underworld, there is no law but the law of the dead. And it was not a mortal bed they sought, but one bound by oath and by fate. They called it love, but the gods called it a crime. The king of the underworld did not answer with mercy. The queen did not smile. Instead, the earth claimed them, one to remain, one to suffer. For some say that only one returned, and others say that neither came back to the world of the living, that the underworld does not forget, that once you cross into its silence, you belong to it. Still, there are tales that speak of reason, that try to explain the story not with gods and shadows, but with kings and their laws, that Hades was not a god, but a man, a ruler of a far land called Molossia, that his wife was named Persephone, and his daughter was called Kor, and that he had a dog, massive and terrible, with 3 heads and teeth like blades. This hound, he said, would test all suitors, and he promised that whoever could defeat the beast would win his daughter's hand. But Theseus and his friend did not come to fight. They came to take, And when the king discovered their plan, he acted. He let the dog loose. One man died instantly, torn by teeth and fury. The other, Theseus, was chained, not in myth, but in stone, locked in a cell, forgotten. But fate moved again. Heracles passed through that land. He came as a guest, as a traveler, and the king, in passing, told him the story of two men, bold and foolish, of one now dead, of one still in chains. And Heracles, upon hearing it, felt sorrow, not for the one who died, his fate was sealed, but for the one still breathing. And so, he asked. He did not demand. He asked for the man to be freed. The king, perhaps moved by the request, agreed, and Theseus returned. He came back to the light, back to the world he had left behind, and in time he gave thanks. He raised an altar to the one who saved him. He remembered the hand that reached into the dark and pulled him out. Others tell a stranger tale still, that when Heracles came to the underworld for the dog, he was welcomed by the queen as if he were her brother, that she did not fear him, that she understood why he had come. She gave him the hound, jagged-toothed and terrible. She let him pass through the gates. And she gave him more. She let him free the one still bound, the one still chained to the rock. But the punishment had left its mark. When Heracles pulled Theseus from the stone, it is said a part of him remained stuck to it, that even in freedom he had left something behind, that no one walks into the underworld unchanged, not even those who return. And so the story is told again and again, in pieces and fragments, in songs and in silence, of a man who followed a friend, of a queen who watched, of punishment and of mercy, of fire and of stone, and of a world that waits beneath the earth, where every choice is measured and every step matters. Then, as Heracles approached the shadowy gates of the realm of the dead, in his quest to fetch the hound of Hades, Cerberus, the air grew heavy and the sky dimmed, as if mourning the arrival of one still living into the land of those long gone. The world seemed to grow quieter with every step he took forward. This was not a place for the living, but Heracles was no ordinary man. Determined and undaunted, he advanced into the dark lands beneath the earth. As he moved deeper into the realm, he saw the herds of Hades, cattle that grazed silently among the gloom, watched over by their keeper, Menwat. This guardian of the dead was no ordinary shepherd. He was the son of Kuthonimos, and his eyes glowed with suspicion as he saw Heracles draw near. But Heracles had a purpose, and he knew that the spirits needed blood in order to be summoned, to speak, to remember. So he slew one of the sacred cattle of Hades to make an offering. The blood flowed, thick and dark, soaking the ground. Menwat, angered by the slaughter, stepped forward and challenged the hero. Without words, they locked in a struggle. Muscles strained, breath heaved, and the shadows watched. Heracles grabbed the keeper around the torso, with arms like iron bands, and squeezed. Ribs cracked beneath the pressure. Menwat groaned, his strength failing, but before death could come, a voice rang out, calm but firm. Persephone had watched in silence, but now she intervened. At her request, Heracles let the wounded man down gently. It was not the time for death, not here, not by his hand. Still bound to his mission, Heracles approached the king of this shadowy world. Standing before Hades, he asked to take Cerberus with him. The god did not refuse outright. Instead, he set a condition. The dog could be taken, but Heracles must use no weapons, no tricks, no tools brought from the world of light. He must take the beast with his own hands, through strength alone. So Heracles descended further and sought the beast. The hound Cerberus waited, monstrous and grim, with 3 snarling heads and a body built of nightmares. Chains clanked as it moved, its eyes glowed like fire from the deep, and its breath reeked of decay. But Heracles, armed only with will and strength, engaged the beast. There was no sword, no shield, just him and the dog. The two clashed with fury. Claws slashed, jaws snapped, but Heracles held fast. He wrapped his arms around the great creature, wrestling with it through the darkness. At last, the beast yielded. Its head lowered, its growls fell to silence. Heracles had conquered it. The watchers, spirits of the dead, looked on in silence, some with awe, some with fear. And so, bound in chains, the great dog was led out from the underworld. Those who saw it in the world above were filled with wonder and dread. A living man had walked into the land of the dead and returned, and with him he brought proof. But that was not all he did. In the shadows, trapped and forgotten, were 2 others, Theseus and Pirithous. They had once dared to attempt what no man should, to steal the queen of the dead. For that crime they had been imprisoned, bound in chains that time could not break. When Heracles found them, they reached out to him, desperate and pleading. And Heracles, moved by their suffering, asked Hades for their release. Once again, the Lord of the Dead agreed. Theseus was brought back, his chains removed. Pirithous, however, remained, his punishment too deep, his crime too great. Still, for one soul, mercy was given. The queen too, Persephone, showed favor, watching this act with eyes that saw more than judgment. In the silence of her realm, something like compassion stirred. And when Heracles returned to the world of the living, leading the 3-headed dog and 1 freed man behind him, the tail of his feet spread far and wide. Some said the rulers of the underworld had trembled on their throne when he brought the beast to heel, that even they, who feared nothing, had been shaken. But the underworld remembered, and its wrath was not always turned away. For in another time, another tale, it was told that Hades and Persephone unleashed a plague upon Thebes. The land of Ionia was seized by death, and many perished. The city was silent with mourning. Desperate, the people sent word to the oracle at Gortyn, begging for guidance. The answer came clear. The gods below were angry, and only by sacrifice would they be calmed. 2 maidens were required, 2 who would give their lives willingly to the gods of the dead. But no one stepped forward. Fear ruled their hearts, and silence ruled their homes. Days passed, the dead piled high, and then a servant woman revealed the oracle's words once more. The truth rang through the city like thunder. Still, none moved. But then came the Coronites, 2 sisters, young and brave. They did not weep, they did not run. Instead, they walked forward. No one forced them, no one commanded. They chose. For the city, for the gods, for the peace that might follow, they gave their lives. And the gods below saw. Hades and Persephone watched as the maidens gave themselves without fear, and they were moved, not with joy, but with pity. And in that moment their wrath eased. The plague lifted, the winds returned, life stirred once more. But the maidens did not disappear. Instead, they were changed. The gods, in their rare kindness, gave them a new form. The sisters rose into the sky, their spirits trailing fire across the heavens. They became comets, blazing paths through the night, never forgotten, always watching. So the underworld, with all its silence and shadow, is not without balance. It punishes, yes, but it can also reward. Its queen, Persephone, holds power not only to doom, but to save. She watches every step, weighs every choice, and sometimes, when the moment is right, she opens her hand, not to strike, but to offer release. Then, As the cries of suffering echoed through the land and the people of the city trembled beneath the weight of the plague, news reached the ears of two maidens, known as the daughters of Orion. These sisters, still untouched by the illness, were at their loom, weaving in silence when the messenger arrived with the words of the oracle. The city was gripped by fear. Death walked openly in the streets, and the people's hope had dwindled to a whisper. But the oracle had spoken clearly. Only the sacrifice of two willing maidens could ease the wrath of the gods below and end the punishment. Many had heard these words and turned away, unwilling to pay such a price. But not these two. As soon as they heard what was required, the daughters of Orion did not hesitate. Without complaint, without fear, they accepted what must be done. They stood tall, their faces calm, their hands steady. They were not driven by despair or fear of the plague, but by love for their people and respect for the will of the gods. And as they stepped forward, they called out 3 times to the rulers of the underworld, their voices strong and full of resolve. Each cry carried the same message, that they came willingly, that they offered their lives freely, that their deaths would be gifts to appease the gods and save their city. Then, with no ceremony, no delay, each maiden took the tool used in their weaving, a bodkin, and thrust it into her own shoulder. Blood flowed, red against pale skin, and they opened their own throats, offering not only their voices, but their breath, their life, their very essence. As the blood spilled, the earth opened to receive them. The people who watched wept, but the maidens fell with peace in their eyes. They had done what none else dared, and far below, where light does not reach, where shadows linger endlessly, the rulers of the dead saw what had happened. Persephone and her consort watched from their dark thrones, their faces still and unreadable. But in that moment, something stirred in them. The sight of such a willing sacrifice, such quiet strength, moved them. And so they did not let the maidens' bodies decay in the soil. They did not let them become nameless dust. Instead, they made the bodies vanish from the earth, and from the place where they fell, a light rose. It grew bright and streaking across the sky, until the sisters were no longer of the earth nor of the dead, but of the heavens. And from that day on, men looked up and saw the 2 lights in the sky, 2 fiery trails moving across the stars. They named them comets, and in that name the maiden's memory lived on. Yet not all were met with such favor. In another tale, a woman named Euphemia, born of the nymphs and once full of grace and life, turned her heart away from the one she had once honored. She had once given worship to Artemis, but over time her reverence faded. The goddess, in her pride, struck out with her arrows, and the punishment was swift. The life Euphemia had known was torn away, but her end did not come by death alone. Persephone, watching from her throne in the shadows, reached out, and Euphemia, still alive, was taken, snatched from the world of the living and carried into the land of the dead. Her body did not die, but her world changed forever. And so she passed into the realm of shadows, a living woman in a place where breath had no meaning. But there were still others who journeyed to the underworld not in punishment, but in quest. One such was Psyche. Her path was not guided by her own desires, but by the demands of another. Sent by the goddess of love, Psyche was given a task few would dare to attempt. A small box was placed in her hands, and with it, instructions. Go to the underworld, go to Persephone herself, and ask for a gift. A small measure of beauty, only enough for a single day, was what the goddess demanded, and Psyche, though weary from trials, obeyed. As she stood on the edge of the world, unsure how to proceed, a tower, ancient and wise, whispered to her the secrets of the journey. She would have to pass by the guard of the Underworld, the great three-headed hound who stood at the gates. This beast, fierce and watchful, allowed no one to pass without challenge. But he could be calmed. In her hands, Psyche carried cakes, simple yet powerful, and these would be her key. She must give one to the beast, and in doing so, he would let her pass without harm. So she journeyed downward, cake in hand, fear in her heart but purpose in her stride. As she approached the gate, the beast appeared, its mouth snarling and eyes burning. But she held out the cake and the creature stilled. The jaws closed, the growls faded. It stepped aside. Inside, she found the queen of the dead. Persephone, regal and serene, welcomed her with kindness. She offered Psyche a seat upon a soft cushion and food rich in scent and flavor. But Psyche remembered the warning. She refused the luxury, chose instead the hard ground and asked for coarse bread. Only then did she speak her purpose, and Persephone, hearing the request, did not scorn her. With gentle hands, she filled the box and handed it over. No tricks, no traps. Just the quiet favor of a queen who ruled with calm and saw truth in the eyes of a mortal. With the box in hand, Psyche retraced her steps, offering the second cake to the beast and returning once more to the light above. And though her journey had taken her to the darkest place, she returned whole, her task complete. These tales, from sacrifice to punishment, from mercy to guidance, all pass through the shadowed hands of the queen of the underworld. Persephone, ever watchful, holds the power not just of death, but of choice. Some she punishes, others she raises. Some she watches in silence, and others she reaches for with unseen hands. In every tale, her presence is the same, measured, deep, and filled with a weight that few understand, but all must face. Then, holding tightly to the small sealed box that had been handed to her in the dark realm, she began her journey back toward the light. The warnings she had received echoed in her mind like a gentle but persistent whisper. The tower's voice had been clear. She must not, under any circumstance, open the box. That box, a vessel of divine beauty, was not meant for her eyes or her hands to explore. She was told to return it untouched, sealed exactly as it had been given to her. She was reminded to show no curiosity, to resist all temptation, to trust that her task was not to know, but to carry. She was told that if she succeeded, she would be one step closer to her freedom and her future. And so she held the box close, pressing forward, following each step as instructed. As she approached the great three-headed guardian again, the monstrous beast that stood at the boundary of the underworld, she reached for the second cake. With steady fingers, she offered it as a gift, just as before. The beast, recognizing the treat, calmed. Its growling ceased, its eyes softened, and it allowed her to pass, its head watching silently as she moved beyond its post. She walked swiftly, not looking back. At the river, the silent ferryman awaited her return. Still holding the pole in one weathered hand, he stretched out the other, demanding the coin she had held in reserve. She reached into her sleeve and placed it in his palm. Without a word, he accepted the payment, and the boat began to drift across the black waters once more. She kept the box close to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around it, feeling the weight of it and all that it meant. The journey back across the river felt longer than before, as if the current of time itself had slowed. When at last she stepped onto the solid ground of the living world and felt the warmth of sunlight on her skin, she paused. She tilted her face to the sky, breathing in the fresh air. The brightness of the day struck her eyes after the long shadows of the underworld. The light danced on her skin, and her spirit seemed to rise with it. She had done it. She had gone into the depths, spoken to the queen, received the gift, and returned. She had kept her word. But then, in that peaceful moment, another thought crept into her heart. As she stood under the clear sky, the box clutched to her chest. Her mind began to stir with something she hadn't felt in the underworld: curiosity. A voice, quiet at first but growing louder, began to speak from within her. It asked why she, after everything she had endured, after all the dangers she had faced and overcome, should not take just a little of what she carried. After all, inside that box was beauty, a beauty fit for gods, a beauty that, if it touched her skin, might make her more radiant than any woman who walked the earth. And more than anything else, she wanted to please the one she loved. He had left her once. Perhaps, if she became more beautiful, he would never leave her again. The thought took hold of her completely. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with desire. The desire to see, to touch, to taste what was within. Her breath quickened. Her pulse beat like a drum inside her chest. She looked around. There was no one to stop her. No goddess, no beast, no voice of warning. She was alone. Just her and the box. The decision had to be hers. She spoke aloud, her voice soft and filled with wonder. How foolish I would be to carry a treasure so rare, so powerful, and not use even the smallest part of it for myself. Her fingers found the edge of the lid. Slowly, she lifted it. Just a crack, just a little peek. But no perfume escaped, no shimmer of divine light, no glow of beauty emerged to caress her skin. Instead, something heavy and unseen rushed out. It poured from the box. Like smoke without fire, a thick mist of silence. It wrapped around her before she could step back. It moved like a shadow with weight, spreading into her mouth, her eyes, her lungs. It was not beauty that lay within the box. It was sleep, a deep and endless sleep, born in the heart of the underworld, shaped by the will of those who rule the dead. As the dark mist touched her, it pulled her down. Her legs gave way beneath her. Her arms fell limp at her sides. Her head tilted gently, her eyes rolled back. She collapsed where she stood, the box falling from her hands. She lay on the ground like one struck by death. Her limbs were still, her chest no longer rose or fell. She looked as though she had simply fallen asleep. But it was a sleep no mortal could wake from on their own, the sleep of Hades, true and final. Time passed, but she did not stir. Her body remained where it had fallen, her spirit trapped in that strange darkness. Then, from the distance, another presence arrived, one who had watched her from afar, one who still loved her despite all. He came to her side, his wings whispering softly as they folded behind him. He knelt beside her and looked down. Her face was peaceful, but her stillness struck him like a wound. He knew what she had done. He saw the box lying open beside her, the sleep still hanging in the air. But he did not scold. He did not weep. Gently, he reached down with careful fingers. He brushed the mist from her face. He gathered it, all of it, drawing it back into the box from which it had come. He sealed it again, tight and fast so that it could no longer escape. Then, with his hands still glowing from the divine touch, he placed them on her cheeks. He whispered to her, calling her back. The warmth of his voice reached the edges of her darkness. Slowly, so slowly, her fingers twitched, her chest rose, her eyes opened. She breathed again, and so she returned, not by her own strength, but by the love that still remained. The sleep had tried to claim her, but it had not been stronger than the bond between two hearts. She rose, blinking at the light, and took the box once more, this time sealed, untouched, and ready to be delivered, just as she had promised.